All right. I am live on as many of these channels as I can remember. And I should be going to bed, but I needed to soak my feet. I can't believe I'm having to say that, but my feet were hurting like crazy today. And so I'm trying an Epsom salt bath. I feel like I'm like 80. But hey, it works. So, uh, all right, there we go. I was thinking I'd do this arc machine gun for my heavy. It's got Vorpal, this arc, which I think is the um, one of the surges. All right, here is the Lost Sector. Doing it on Legend. Um, all right, make sure my mods are right. Um, do I need that? Definitely kinetic. Yeah. Um, hmm. I think that would be better. I'm using a bow. Targeting can't hurt for that. Okay. Fastball, bolster and detonation firepower. Don't think. Oof, that's rough. I have to get rid of both of these, which I suppose is actually worth it. Maybe. The kinetic loader costs 3. I really don't like that, but okay. Harmonic, yeah. I remember there being a lot of void in here. Um, put void, and then I'll put one of these things on. Double that. Okay. I'm not going to overthink it. Let's just go. I don't know what was going on with my feet today. It's just because I didn't do much. I did the live with Devon and Cedro today, and I did a lot of just studying about editing and live streaming. I remember this morning I got the sound to come through the speakers right for the first time. So like right now, I can hear this game perfectly. And it's possible that it's actually coming through the stream as well. But I love the fact that I can actually hear it. I've been playing this game for like a week without any sound. I am such a bad shot. I think I shot like 10 times before I hit him. Okay. Now, one of the things about this lost sector is you have limited revives and they're on a timer. So because it took me so long to get that first room open, it may be that I run out of my timer toward the end of the activity. I think it's like 15 minutes. It could be different for each lost sector though. Okay, what do we got over here? Got stops. All right, final plate. Hope I have enough time. God. Got it. Okay. I have all these revives, but they will go away if I don't hurry up. I am the type of player who likes to take his time, mainly because I can't see, but I make bad decisions too when I rush. I'm a deliberate thinker, I suppose. So it's just not great for a fast paced action game. But you know, hey, life is life. You work it out. Hey, all right. Just reload that. So I got stops here. Now you have to be tricky with this guy because if you stun him before he jumps, his stun will just cancel. It's really weird. So one thing I might do is toss a grenade first. Get him to jump down. Good shit. I don't think I've ever dealt with them that efficiently before. I've always died to one of them. But I guess I talked it out loud. I was like, oh, I know what to do with these guys. Yeah. I got enough ammo. Bitch, I'm not done with you yet. Wait for that shit to wear off. They take extra damage or damage resistance when they have that super active. Damn. That went way better than I thought it would. But no exotic. Mm. Okay. Let's see. I thought that was flawless, but I could have died. I don't know. I don't think there's a time for that though. I thought there might have been probably a master, but let's see. I think this time I might listen to something. don't like the way that Spotify does podcasts when you're listening. Alexa, stop. Okay, going in. I think I did it a little better that time. I mean, I suppose it helps to practice. This hand cannon is just so fucking good. Alstringer, I was so happy when they brought this back. Yep, that one. I was trying to duck into that hallway, but there's very little hiding room in there. It's kind of like a little hiding spot. Oh boy. Hey. I love how fast this one reloads. That's the thing. Hand cannons just they're miserable to reload. But this has Outlaw Frenzy, both of which have reload perks. And Frenzy does damage as well. The Outlaw just straight up. I don't know. And also the cannon, itself is fairly accurate. Like I hit my shots a lot. Maybe it's bullet magnetism or whatever they call it, but it feels really good. Yeah, it always has. Even before it had these good perks on it. I can't remember what my original Austringer had, but it may have. Yeah, I don't think it had much. I remember those perks being trash, actually. And you couldn't craft it like you did this one. Ooh. Okay. Let's see what we got over this way. I wonder if I even put the arc mods on. It feels like I did. But honestly, I don't remember doing it. I'm gonna check next time. Ooh. God damn fucking moth. The fuck. I didn't put them on. It's amazing how powerful this is without those mods, though. Because those mods are good. Like, I could use that damage resistance right now. But all right. All right. Got one word back. I think I had my overshield. Okay, let's just go. I can't believe that worked. Let's go. I got to get out of this hallway. There we go. Some heavy. Whoa. She has a pulse grenade. Okay. Nice. Okay. What the fuck? Why is this so difficult? Oh my God, I'm going to die again. Oh, come on. uh, okay. I knew it was going to kill me eventually.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Bona. Impress even the toughest critics with Bona. When you clean your floors with Bona's plant-based floor cleaners, you can impress the unimpressible with your beautiful clean floors. Learn more at Bona.com. Bona, for floors that impress. NPR's Invisibilia goes deep for the questions that keep us up at night.
Are you my best friend still? Question mark. Yeah.
How are you want it? What would you do with it? That's the thing I want. That's hard.
What good is fishing without a bait hook?
Listen to Invisibilia wherever you get your podcasts.
In 2020, I was on an historic flight.
I'd like to inform you that we have just crossed the border,
Okay.
Saudi Arabia, for the first time in the history of Israel Airliners.
It was the first time influential Arab country. It was the kind of symbolic gesture that Israel has been seeking for decades. A breakthrough like diplomatic relations is still many months away or more if it happens. But there has been steady momentum in that direction that's being touted by those who want it to happen, especially Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
I think that we're about to witness a pivot of history, maybe.
Felicia Schwartz is a correspondent for the Financial Times, and she's been doing a deep dive into the intensive shuttle diplomacy of the last few months with senior U.S. officials going to Saudi Arabia.
There is this growing closeness between Israel and its Gulf Arab neighbors, some of it out in the open, some of it not, like Israel and Saudi. And I think policymakers want to take advantage of that and use that as a new kind of lever.
The U.S. and Saudi Arabia are negotiating a three-way deal involving the U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia.
That would be kind of the crown jewel of Israel's ambition to be regarded as a kind of equal significant power in the region, but also helping the Americans to create a Middle East that subscribes to its worldview where all of its close partners can cooperate with each other in the open.
President Biden says a deal may be underway. He would get to preside over an historic agreement before he runs for re-election. But Saudi and Israeli leaders have had chilly relations with Biden. They have supported Donald Trump before, and they might want to wait for a better deal if he becomes president again. Consider this. Diplomatic relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Could they remake the region? What would it take to get there?
I think that these talks have gotten more serious as the parties and the players in all of the capitals understand that the window of time for this process to happen is closing.
That's after the break. From NPR, I'm Daniel Estrin. It's Sunday, August 13th.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Honeywell. Built upon their own ESG efforts of the past decades, unmatched experience, and innovative technologies, Honeywell offers a portfolio of solutions that can help you achieve your sustainability goals wherever you are in the journey. Learn more at honeywell.com/NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor USPS. USPS Ground Advantage offers reliable and affordable 2 to 5 day package shipping. Get the Ground Advantage at USPS.com/advantage. The United States Postal Service, delivering for America.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Charles Schwab with their original podcast, Choiceology. Choiceology is a show about the psychology and economics behind people's decisions. Download the latest episode and subscribe at schwab.com/podcast.
It's Consider This from NPR. For the past few months, President Biden's top foreign policy advisors have been working as intermediaries between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Eventually, they want to get the two countries to agree on a deal to finally open formal diplomatic relations. It would be a breakthrough for Israel to get that recognition after decades of Arab hostility stemming from the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Saudi Arabia is home to two of Islam's holiest sites, and it's an oil giant in the region. But it seems like an almost impossible three-way agreement. Here's the Financial Times' Felicia Schwartz again.
The Saudis want civil nuclear cooperation with the U.S. and some sort of defense pact guarantee assurance. The Israelis want formal relations with Saudi Arabia. They want to open embassies, all of the kind of formal, public handshakes, travel, everything. The U.S. wants Israel to be formally recognized by Saudi Arabia, and they want the Saudis to help them convince Israel to make concessions for the Palestinians to, at the very least, meaningfully improve Palestinians' quality of life and perhaps somehow flick at their aspirations for statehood.
What is the timeline here? How likely is this deal?
I think if it's going to happen under President Biden, it's the next 6 to 9, maybe 6 to 12 months. The senior officials I've spoken with put the likelihood at less than 50%. There's a lot of work to be done. It probably won't happen, but I think the fact that we're even talking about that it could is extraordinary.
So what's standing in the way? Well, for one thing, Saudi Arabia wants a civilian nuclear program. It says for peaceful purposes like generating electricity. But Schwartz says if the Saudis are able to enrich and reprocess uranium on Saudi soil, they could use it to eventually create a nuclear bomb to counter perceived threats from Iran's nuclear program. And then there's the fact that in recent years, the Saudi leadership has grown unpopular in the U.S. for a variety of reasons.
One being the 2018 murder of Jamal Khashoggi, a dissident journalist, the war in Yemen, which particularly in Congress, Saudi got a lot of heat for indiscriminately killing civilians, heavy-handed tactics. And then also, the Saudis have been taking steps to cut oil production as gas prices for Americans are high. So there is a feeling for many people that Saudi Arabia, for a lot of reasons, isn't a great partner.
The crown prince and de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia is Mohammed bin Salman. MBS. He's known for cracking down on dissidents. The US intelligence community released a report assessing that he personally approved the operation to capture or kill Jamal Khashoggi.
I think that the Americans feel like, okay, they put out this report, they showed that MBS is guilty. I think privately they've certainly raised it with him. And
I mean, he had a nickname going around Washington, Mr. Bonesaw, MBS.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable to see where we've come since then.
I think it's incredibly remarkable, but maybe in a way, if you've been around Washington as long as I have and others way longer, I think it's just not that surprising. At the end of the day, Biden said that human rights is going to be at the center of his foreign policy. I think it's very clear that, he's definitely paid lip service to that, but there are a lot of just fundamental American priorities that sometimes mean getting into bed with unsavory characters, and MBS is one of them.
What about the fact that the Saudi leadership and the Israeli leadership, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had been so close to former President Trump? Why don't they just wait for a potential Trump presidency? Why would they want to strike a deal with Biden?
That is the $1 million question that sort of gets at this. Why is it this 6 to 9 month time frame? I think it will have more legitimacy if it happens under a Democratic president, because I think pro-Israel sentiment in the Democratic Party is slipping. And Democrats, based on all the bad blood for a whole host of reasons with them and the Republicans and Trump in particular, and the pro-Israel policy moves that he took, are not going to want to give him a pro-Israel victory that requires the support of Congress. So there is a kind of confluence of political forces in the U.S. that can find each other now, and it's not really clear that they could find each other in the same way post-2024.
And a deal could be a big win for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
It would cement his place in history. I think no one is more concerned about their legacy than Benjamin Netanyahu. And this would be the thing. This is the dream of Israel since it was created as a state. So, I mean, it might wash away some of his, more controversial corruption cases and everything that he's facing, but he's got to get there.
And for the Palestinians?
Unfortunately, while what to do about the Palestinians looms large over these conversations, they're really not a part of them. And so what's in it for the Palestinians? Maybe nothing, unfortunately.
I spoke about this with Badr Asif. He's an assistant professor of history at Kuwait University. I asked him what the significance of the deal would be for the region.
It will only be significant if Palestine is front and center in this deal. No amount of normalization with any Arab state, for that matter, can manage to shake this issue without Palestine being front and center. So it would behoove the Israelis, the Saudis, and the Americans to make sure that this is in their minds. I know that the Saudis have this in their mind, regardless of the many narratives that we hear out there. And it's unfortunate that a lot of the narratives that we hear are either US-centric or Israel-centric. And the Saudi view or the Arab view, by extension, gets lost in the process. And I think it's time for this to be balanced off. There will not be any movement forward without a resolution to the Palestinian issue. And by a resolution, I mean a permanent, sustainable one that brings dignity and justice to the Palestinian people.
If a deal goes through that provides a meaningful solution to Palestinians' quest for independence and the things that they want, what significance would this have? I mean, what is your kind of headline of what possibilities this holds?
If Palestine gets an independent state with all the semblances of sovereignty, then this would be a huge deal because it would upend the whole security architecture in the Middle East. It would usher in a real peace for the first time since the end of the World War II era, in which we've seen the creation of various states in the region, including Israel, but with a lot of lingering files and chapters, most prominently being the Palestinian one.
I pointed out that a Palestinian state seems very far off. If that is the condition for a deal, it would make a deal very unlikely. He thinks this deal may come in stages. Without a Palestinian state, the Saudis may just begin with a smaller step toward Israel.
But let me tell you something. They've been playing with words in terms of, is it a Big Bang deal or are we going to go through phases? Then it keeps the door open to striking that Big Bang towards the end.
That was Badr Asif. He teaches history at Kuwait University. NPR's Aya Batrawi covers Saudi Arabia. I asked her about the likelihood of a deal and when we might see one.
This is a Saudi leadership that is hyper-focused on its own national security interests. This is a crown prince who is focused on what is best for Saudi Arabia. And if they're not going to be able to get the kind of concessions they need from this Israeli government for the Palestinians, what they're going to demand and what they're going to require are major security concessions from the Biden administration and from members of Congress across the aisle to guarantee that this deal is worth it for the kingdom. And so the question really is, what is the kingdom, what is Saudi Arabia going to get out of Washington in order to make it worth it for this crown prince to stand and shake hands, or any member of his government, with this hardline right-wing Israeli government at this particular time in history?
NPR's Aya Petraoui. It's Consider This from NPR. I'm Daniel Estrin.
Support for NPR and the following message come from Bona. Impress even the toughest critics with Bona. When you clean your floors with Bona's plant-based floor cleaners, you can impress the unimpressible with your beautiful clean floors. Learn more at Bona.com. Bona, for floors that impress. Support for NPR and the following message come from Uber One. One membership to save on Uber and Uber Eats. Join Uber One today at uber.com/Uber One. Taxes and other fees still apply.
A New York man has some beef with Taco Bell.
He's filed a lawsuit against the fast food chain accusing it of false advertising.
A New York man is suing Taco Bell for $5 million. He claims the ads make it look like the menu items are more full of meat and veggies than they actually are.
The bigger, beefier, triple-double crunch wrap.
Now, the same law firm filed a suit in Florida last year against Burger King, alleging the company's ads make the burgers look bigger than they really are. Starting in 2020, we saw a spike in these types of lawsuits. And late last year, we reached a man who filed many of them. They call him the Vanilla Vigilante.
Yeah, I would say I'm wired a little bit different.
Coming up on Today Explained, we will ask this man, Spencer Sheehan, what motivates his possibly absurd quest, and we dig into what consumers, you, me, New York man, actually get out of it.
Support for the show today comes from BetterHelp. Life comes with a lot of decisions, and it can sometimes be hard to know the right path. A therapist
There we
can help
go.
you map out what you really want, so you trust yourself to make great choices and feel excited about the future. BetterHelp says you can
So, I got a completely useless exotic. Yay. But no, it's good. I think I had a productive day today. I got the sound through my headphones. It's funny though, I'm gonna be chasing that success, you know. You want to go forward and find something that's going on, right? Like, what are some of the things, I guess, for my stream that I need to do? Maybe accessibility options. It would be great if there was a way to get the chat to read out. I know that's possible in OBS. In fact, I saw a video for a plugin that would actually read out the text in your voice, which is kind of cool. Make your voice the AI voice that reads the text, which is kind of weird. But let me go back to this courtyard. So I did figure out how to get Spotify to play the podcast the way that I want it. So we'll see. See, this is Today Explained on Vox. It was one of my favorite news sources, really. They have really great explainers. They've done those explained episodes on Netflix, and they have them on YouTube as well. And they have like Unexplained, and then they have the gray area, which used to be called Vox Conversations, which I can see why they might change that. Conversation sounds boring. But no, it's a really high quality deep dive into different subjects, and yeah, I really enjoy it.
This day is brought to you by Progressive. Are you driving your car or doing laundry right now? Podcasts go best when they're bundled with another activity, kind of like Progressive home and auto policies. They're best when bundled too. Having those two policies together makes insurance easier and could help you save. Customers who save by switching their home and car insurance to Progressive surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2021 and May 2022. Potential savings will deserve. So here we go, the Sunday favorite from the archives. Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avergan. This day, August 10th, 2006, the incident actually happened on August 11th, 2006. George Allen was on a campaign stop in Brakes, Virginia, near the Kentucky border. George Allen was running for re-election as Virginia senator. He had also been Virginia's governor, but today he stepped in it because on this day in 2006, he was caught on camera. What was he caught on camera doing, Peter Hamby?
He was saying, give a big welcome to my friend Makaka over here. Welcome to America and the real world of Virginia, or something like that.
Yeah, I remember
that.
that.
That is, of course, the voice of Peter Hamby, who we have on because he does such a good George Allen impersonation. We just were like, who does the best George Allen in the world? But no, Peter Hamby is political journalist, host of Good Luck America at Snapchat, contributor to the new outlet Puck News, but also I think a great fit for this conversation because he is, to my mind, one of the best chroniclers of how new media and new technology has transformed politics. And that, in many ways, is what this story is about, an early viral moment that truly changed an important election. So, Peter Hamby, this is your formal intro. Thank you for doing this. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to geek out on this.
Yes, and also Virginia native, which we can get into as well. Nicole Hemmer and Kelly Carr-Jackson are here as always. Hello, Nikki. Hello, Kelly.
Hello, Jody. Hey there.
And a quick shout out to our listeners.
I do remember the Makaka moment.
That we do this, reminding us that we should do this. Thank you, Jacob. Thank you to all our listeners who give us suggestions. So, Peter, let's talk about this a bit as a media moment. I suppose one thing we should define is there is a person by the name of S.R. Siddharth, who's very young, just out of college, maybe still in college, and he is at this George Allen event in the capacity of what is known as a tracker. So what is a tracker, and how does it fit into this political moment?
Yeah, that's a great question because it really signals a pivot in campaign politics. Trackers are pretty commonplace now, and they might even be obsolete because they're just cameras everywhere all the time. But in the 2006 race, trackers were pioneered by Democratic campaigns who were increasingly, at least among younger, more clever staffers, using the internet and video in a way that Republican campaigns weren't yet. And so S.R. Siddharth, who was an undergrad at UVA from Fairfax, was in Southwest Virginia with George Allen. And I went back and looked at this. He had just been tracking Allen's campaign for like 5 or 6 days before this Makaka moment happened. But basically, he would stand in the back of a rally, sometimes with the press corps, sometimes when the press corps wasn't even there, as I think was the case with this incident, just recording on a mini DV camera, everything a candidate said. And then he would, hustle to FedEx or drive all the way back to campaign headquarters and drop off the video and do this every single day for the entire campaign. And then
on behalf of the opponent, Jim Webb.
Yeah, on behalf of Jim Webb's campaign. And then that became more commonplace in races in the coming years.
And so this moment with Allen is he notices that this guy has been showing up at all his events and tracking him. And what is, you said it in the intro, but sort of describe what Allen does.
It's funny. I went back and watched the Makaka video. It's still on YouTube. Barely has 1 million views. But, was the first big YouTube moment in politics. And he's sort of standing there. You see him through Siddharth's grainy video. And he starts out, he's in Southwest Virginia, now taken for granted as a Republican stronghold. It's basically Appalachia. Back then, though, in Virginia, Democrats could be competitive down there. So candidates were going to Southwest Virginia a lot. And Allen is talking to this crowd and says, we're going to run this campaign on positive ideas that bring people around. And then he immediately pivots and swivels out and waves his finger around at the tracker and says, we got this guy out here. He points at him. His name is Makaka or something. And then he rambles on for a few more minutes. And then he's making the point that his opponent, Jim Webb, who's actually from Virginia, even though George Allen grew up in California, doesn't come to the real America, doesn't come to Southwest Virginia where we have certain ideals. And then he turns back to S.R. Siddharth again and says, so everyone give a big welcome to Makaka out here. Welcome to the real America. Welcome to real Virginia. And then that's the clip. And the Webb campaign basically clipped that and shipped it out in an email to political reporters a few days later.
And this becomes a huge story. Siddharth is not white. And this was, Makaka was not a word that most people had heard, but it was quickly revealed to be used as a racial slur. And so it puts the issue of Allen's
racism or this racist comment at the center of the general election. And it's not just that he said it, but that there's tape of it. And so that tape gets played again and again, which helps to cement this moment and this image in the minds of voters.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I was working at CNN at the time. I was working on a show as a producer on a segment about the internet and politics, which was really treated as a funny little trinket on the side at the time by CNN and establishment politics. The internet, I mean, not central to the way it matters in politics now. And that segment I worked on got killed all the time by producers because they were like, we don't have time for this. It's just the internet. But then because this was video for cable, it was perfect for Washington cable specifically. And there was a debate inside CNN that I remember. I was pretty junior at the time, but we had pretty rigorous standards and practices in the legal department. And it was like, can we verify this video is real? We don't even know because it was YouTube, and this was a year after YouTube was invented, and the brass and the older folks at CNN just didn't get this thing, even though it obviously looked credible. And so once it got approved, it was looped over and over and over and over again. And then macaca was interesting too. The word itself wasn't commonplace as a racial slur. And I remember being at CNN and people were Googling it and didn't know what to do. And we kind of waited till the Washington Post wrote their story the next day to use their definition of it. But it just sounded like something a rich white guy would say in private at a cocktail party, right? It reminded you of your racist aunt swilling champagne or something at a party. That's what it sounded like. And then what you just said, Nicole, that race, the Webb-Allen race, that was a Democratic year in the end, but it started out, Webb, was an underdog. He was trailing by 8, 9, 10, 12 points in the polls. Virginia wasn't yet what it is now. It's basically a purple to blue state. It was still back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, and mostly Republican. But then that video just started to call attention to this race. And as people peeled back more layers about George Allen, all of these other sort of racist things came up. He wore a Confederate flag pin in his high school yearbook. When he was governor of Virginia years earlier, he replaced the only black board member at UVA with a white board member. He passed a Confederate heritage proclamation. And so, if you're a female suburban voter in Northern Virginia, you're like, wait, this guy? And then the race got much closer after that video went viral, and the way videos went viral back then.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to me how
yeah, that was interesting. I was heavily involved in politics back then.
Twice. He sort of does it as a throwaway, and it's not clear if he's referring to him as a name or as a name for a name. It's just not clear. There's just a lot of ambiguity about that. So but I also think that in the moment in which he says it or sort of throws it out there, if this had happened in any other moment, would this have been so controversial? I'm not sure. I don't. In some ways, I say, maybe it gets tucked under the rug, or maybe it gets exploded and he gets canceled, and then that's the whole thing that happens.
First of all, the other angle here is that George Allen grew up the son of a rich NFL coach, went to high school in Southern California in Venice, and was at this rally in Southwest Virginia telling someone who was born in Virginia, even though he was of Indian descent, his parents were immigrants, but he grew up in Fairfax, went to public schools in Virginia, went to UVA, and this guy is on stage in Southwest Virginia pretending to be, just one of the folks, pointing at this actual person from the Commonwealth. So there's that. And then, I tend to think that this wouldn't be as big a deal today. One, the internet angle to it made it new and interesting and different for the press. And two, there was just more of pre-Trump, there were more.
Yeah, pre-Trump is really what it is.
Norms, I hate that word, but
Trump fucking destroyed our norms.
Republican members of Congress say things like that all the time. Republican activists are on camera saying things like that all the time. And even if they do rise to a little controversial, there have always been 24-hour news cycles, but this just, goes into the ether after a few days. Back then, local media was more robust, so you had reporters following these people around in states during campaigns and asking follow-up questions and digging up new angles. There were more, I hate to say this, more enterprising national journalists who would back then spend the time going to, look into Allen's background. And now we live more in a journalism tape culture where people aren't really leaving their desks and following these candidates around and asking questions and digging into their past. And so, I think it was just harder for Allen to overcome this, especially because there were more scandals that came out later in the race that helped drag him down.
We've seen just in recent years people willfully mispronounce Kamala Harris's name. This kind of stuff is happening. Politicians are still playing with this, I would say intentionally, but winkingly in the way that I think Allen was. Yeah. The difference, though, and I think it's so fascinating, is, that you could potentially make the case that Allen didn't really know what he was stepping into, that this whole world of trackers was new, this whole, in his head, he maybe still thought, this is a small event where I can be a little freer, and I can let my inner, racist come out a little bit. And then, he quickly learned the lesson. And I'm curious, Peter, what kind of lesson did this incident teach to other politicians? And have they learned that lesson? Because I still find myself amazed that politicians say anything at all under this idea that everyone in the world is going to hear this almost immediately. But politicians seem to maybe not learn that lesson.
No, and I do think one lesson candidates and politicians have learned is there's always a camera on you, and you can ignore those cameras and clam up, or just say nothing, or give a polite soundbite, or you can lean the other direction and just go all in and like Matt Gaetz or Marjorie Taylor Greene and just like lean into every camera and say like flagrant things all the time and get attention that way. Like there's a perverse reward system in that way. But yeah, I mean, I think Allen learned his lesson in the sense that I need to not be mindful of what I say on a stage. I think you're right. He was in a like rural part of the state at the time. There certainly wasn't like a local TV network down there in breaks covering it or thought it to be valuable. But in subsequent election cycles, 2008 came along the next 2 years. I was out covering candidates in presidential primaries in South Carolina in 2007. And all of the primary candidates, this is before Obama and McCain were the nominees and the press was flying on all times. All of these candidates in the primaries, sometimes I was the only person at their events from CNN, right? And like I would show up at the time with a like tripod or a monopod and put on my camera and put this like little DV tape in. And sometimes I'd be the only person at like a Mike Huckabee event or a Fred Thompson event or a John Edwards event. And if they didn't recognize me, like they'd be like, who are you? Like it was already like getting in the bloodstream that these young, sometimes unpaid like staffers or volunteers were like going around with these little cameras, and it just made them a little more cautious. And there's just such a like guard up now between campaign staffs, political staffs, and the press. Like they don't need reporters anymore. In fact, they are a nuisance. And this just made them even more paranoid, I think.
Folks, I have some incredible news about Radiotopia. I would say one of the best new radio artists out there is joining the network. Ronald Young Jr. is an incredible talent and has a new show called Wait For It. And he is joining Radiotopia. Now, Wait is spelled W-E-I-G-H-T. Wait For It. And the show is about that thing that many in our society are concerned with, gaining or losing. It's a narrative show that tells the story of folks who can't stop thinking about their weight. Ronald Young Jr. is seeking to have the conversations about our bodies that are often understated and sometimes flat out unsaid. I know a bunch of the folks who've made this show. I've met Ronald before. I'm so impressed by this series and so excited that it is coming on board. And right off the bat, Ronald kicks it off with his own story, wondering if he can ever truly be desirable as a fat man. And then he talks to all sorts of folks, fat and straight-sized, who can't seem to keep weight off their minds. So, new episodes start with Radiotopia on August 17th. Subscribe now to Wait For It, W-E-I-G-H-T, for it, wherever you get your podcasts. And welcome, Ronald, to Radiotopia. All right, listeners, can I confess a sort of low-level but still very real ambient fear that I have too? And that fear is that somewhere out there, there's a bunch of money of mine being spent on unwanted subscriptions. I wonder if you have this too, that you've signed up for some streaming service one time or accidentally clicked an auto-renew button on some app. Well, in my case, I have to tell you that those fears were really true. I recently got a sense of how bad it was using Rocket Money, which is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. And lo and behold, I had about $150 worth of subscriptions where I was like, wait a minute, I don't really need that. And on Rocket Money, the average savings for users is $720 a year. So I'm telling you right now, it is time to face that fear, just like I did. It is super easy to do, and it will be well worth it, literally. Stop wasting money on things you don't use, cancel your unwanted subscriptions, and manage your money the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/thisday. That's rocketmoney.com/thisday. One more time, rocketmoney.com/thisday.
I think about, like oftentimes when you've got the hot mic and you think you're not on, and then all of a sudden you say, whatever you think won't be heard. That was kind of this moment. But he does, to his credit, apologize. I don't know how much that helps. Sidar says, he apologized to him. He took the blame for saying it. He didn't realize how offensive it was when it came off. And I think now, especially, we're in a culture where apologies sort of aren't really apologies. People are just like, I'm very sorry to have offended. Like it's not necessarily sincere, but he does apologize.
Yeah. So Allen went on after leading this race to lose by 9,000 votes to Jim Webb, who was himself a little bit strange. And that race, decided control of the Senate. Like if Webb hadn't won that race, Republicans would have moved into the next 2 years, still in control of the Senate, and he swung it. And like it put a punctuation mark on a big midterm wave for Democrats heading into 2008 and the election that lifted up Barack Obama. And then Allen tries to run for Senate in 2012 when Webb says, I'm only going to be a one term and he retires. And Allen does like an apology for it. And like it's part of his bio and his brand at this point that he's the macaca guy. Like, he gets review, he apologizes for it, and there's just not really it doesn't do anything. It just reminds people that he's the macaca guy. He's old news. He's our old governor. He's our old senator. It's like really hard for him to make a comeback. And then what would be different today, I feel like, is not that he would own that he was the macaca guy necessarily, but he would just start to attack the media for asking these questions. He would say elites are like trying to cancel me. That's the strategy that works in Republican politics now, not the sort of conventional, apology tour. I've learned, I've studied, about our nation's troubled history. That doesn't happen.
One other little wrinkle, which I find fascinating, just as you're describing the impact of this moment, is this was, you look back at the calendar, right? It's August 11th. This was literally day one of the general election. The primary had been the day before, or maybe even that exact same day. So it's just remarkable that the defining event happens on hour 2 in the primary. And SR Siddharth was also, it was I think day 3 of his job. It's just everyone is just stepping in it right off the bat. But I'm just fascinated that this happened so early. And then
that race was a perfect storm for Democrats too, because remember the biggest issue at the time before the financial collapse was the Iraq War, right? It was still a litigated things were going off the rails in Iraq. It was basically civil war. And then Democrats, activists, especially on the internet around the time, fetishized this idea of, ideology wasn't that important. It was like biography and image. And these former Republicans and these former military guys, tough guys running as Democrats in the Bush era was like everything that the quote unquote netroots on the internet wanted, right? And like Webb.
Did he wear the boots?
He wore the combat boots. There's a famous picture of him on election day. It was on the front page of the Washington Post with Chuck Schumer, the head of the SEC, and he's like holding out his combat boots on like when they called the race finally, like a week after election day because it was so close. Anyway, Webb was an underdog in his primary to this like establishment lobbyist type guy named Harris Miller. He kicked his ass in the primary because there's so many activists who just love Jim Webb's brand, and they're like, he can beat Republicans in this moment. And then he steps out of the primary, Jody, and exactly what you say happens.
It's just a reminder that Allen was running at the confluence of so much political change. Like Virginia is changing from a red state to a blue state. The tolerance for racism in politics had taken a real turn in just a decade before that, right? Because as governor, he was able to embrace the Confederacy and Confederate heritage and all those ideas, and that becomes a problem for him. And then the media changed on top of that. Like it's just like everything was shifting, and he was on the wrong side of every single one of those shifts.
You're exactly right, Nicole. That's so interesting. That's why I love this race. It's just like there's so many different threads to pull: politics, media, the internet, racism, our political culture. And one other thing I was reminded of too was that Jason Miller of Donald Trump communications director fame was Allen's communications director or press secretary. He's one of the two. Like he was basically a media strategist in Republican politics in a sort of more normal time, and he worked for Allen and was going to work on Allen's presidential campaign. Allen was building a presidential campaign. He was going to pivot from getting reelected in the Senate to running for president in 2008, and he was among like DC insider types, like definitely a front runner. He was going to raise so much money. He was sort of a hybrid like Bush ideologue, but like from the South. Like he was an interesting candidate for political junkies, and then he lost. And it blew up his presidential ambitions. He came out a few months later and said, "I will not run for president," even though he was already toast. And Jason Miller then moved to South Carolina and started working for Mark Sanford, who was also
Also did not go well.
who also saw his career imploded.
Oh my god!
What the fuck?
Goes to show you how all of these
That does not make sense. Why do finishers kill you now?
Well, yeah, they're fragile, but I think it's also
The
don't have
fuck
Jason
is
Miller.
wrong with
It
them?
seems to be the big lesson here. But yeah, that's so as we wrap up, can we just take a moment to just sing the praises of SR Siddharth, who is like poor kid, like summer gig, just like I don't know, probably paying him. I don't know if they're paying him at all, but like he's out there, he's like driving around, like very hot. He's shipping off these tapes. But he in the wake of this, I think it shows real like strength and grace. Like he pens an op-ed. It is not a seize the moment, but he uses he doesn't pick a fight, but he uses the moment to pen an op-ed and sort of point out like there's some deep racism in this state. This is a serious issue. This has revealed some things about an important race. And then moreover, he kind of just like also puts his head down. It's not sensationalized. And now I think he's just I think he's a lawyer. He just lives in Northern Virginia. He's just kind of like moved on with his life.
Not to sound like a curmudgeon here, but I do think today, if a young person in politics got that kind of attention very quickly, not all of them, not everyone, but they would love the clout, they would love the followers, they would try to spin it into a career, and restraint is something that's lost in our internet culture, and the ability to like accept an apology sometimes, or even in politics, like it's addictive. Like you can get, if you're working on campaigns, you're working in political media, you're always seeking that next like adrenaline rush from breaking a story or like being on a winning race. And for someone to do it for a campaign, it's like, it's like, okay, cool, I'm done. I'm gonna go do something else is kind of cool. The other interesting thing is that he was at UVA, and Larry Sabato, who we all know is like a pundit guy in the political press, has a hard to get into political science class at UVA. He still does. And to get in, you have to write an essay. And I remember SR Siddharth, like in his junior or senior year, his application for Larry Sabato's class just said, "I am a Macaca."
Oh, nice.
And because it was just obviously so famous in Virginia politics, he got into the class, and Sabato like later said he was just like one of his favorite students. He was just very smart, thoughtful guy. But that was his 3-word essay. I am a Macaca.
If you're ever going to use your moment of fame,
That's right. Use it to get into Larry's
to
class.
work for you.
Forget Instagram. Forget TikTok.
I'm getting in this class.
Yeah,
My cloud is poli-sci 401.
Our two professors here love that. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the episode. This has been really fascinating. Peter, thank you so much for doing this. You host the show on Snapchat, and you have Puck News. I will also give a shout out to this book. I'm sorry, was it a book or was it like an ebook? The Twitter.
Oh, that was I did a fellowship at the Shorenstein Center at Harvard. It was basically a study, should have been a book because it's so long, about how Twitter sort of ruined or disrupted political journalism.
But it's called "Did Twitter Kill the Boys on the Bus?" And it is actually really great and still worth
great.
revisiting. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, guys.
Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thanks, Jody.
And Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
This Day in Esoteric Political History is a proud member of Radiotopia from PRX, a network of independent, listener-supported, artist-owned podcasts. Our researcher and producer is Jacob Feldman. Our producer is Brittany Brown. You can get in touch with us with any questions or comments or ideas for the show. Email us thisdaypod@gmail.com, or you can find a form at thisdaypod.com. My name is Jody Abraham. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you soon.
This fella here over here with the yellow shirt, Macaca, or whatever his name is, he's with my opponent. He's following us around everywhere. And it's just great. We're going to places all over Virginia.
Down by Golden Gun. I never use that super. I don't know. I question the life choices of people who do like Golden Gun. Who hurt you? Why can't you forgive them?
Radio to PRX. And special thanks to Airbnb for sponsoring this episode of The Jordan Harbinger Show. Maybe you've stayed at an Airbnb before and thought to yourself, yeah, this actually seems pretty doable. Maybe my place could be an Airbnb. It could be as simple as starting with a spare room or your whole place while you're away. Find out how much your place is worth at airbnb.com/host. Welcome to the show. I'm Jordan Harbinger, and this is Skeptical Sunday, a special edition of The Jordan Harbinger Show where journalist and podcaster Andrew Gold and I will break down a topic you may have never thought about, open things up and debunk some common misconceptions. Topics such as why the Olympics are kind of a sham, why expiration dates are nonsense, why tipping makes no sense, recycling, banned foods, toothpaste, chemtrails, and a whole lot more. Normally on The Jordan Harbinger Show, we cover stories and secrets and skills of the world's most fascinating people and turn their wisdom into practical advice that you can use to impact your own life and those around you. We have long-form interviews and conversations with a variety of amazing folks, from spies to CEOs, athletes, authors, thinkers, and performers. And if you're new to the show or you want to tell your friends about the show, the episode starter packs are a great place to do this. These are collections of our favorite episodes organized by topic that will help new listeners get a taste of everything that we do here on this show. Topics like persuasion, influence, disinformation, cyber warfare, China and North Korea, abnormal psychology, crime and cults, and more. Just visit jordanharbinger.com/start.
Yeah, I usually watch the Friday episode of Jordan Harbinger.
Looking at with our skeptical hats on, of course, into the kind of detection
It's kinda
that has
neat,
taken
too.
the internet by storm. Body language. Speaking of which, you're looking a little shifty over there, Andrew. I don't know.
Perhaps it's a sign I'm nervous to be in the presence of greatness.
Or you just have bad posture, or you're tired, or you're cold, or your chair isn't the right height, or you ate something weird for lunch. And that's the thing with body language. We're all familiar with that age-old movie trope where the detective, Columbo or whoever, notices that a suspect is looking a little suspect. And they look up and they look down and they stammer when they speak. And that helps the detective recognize that they're immediately a villain and they're obviously guilty. But is that even remotely close to real life?
I'm pleased you picked up on the television tropes, because I think that's part of where this all comes from. In TV shows, and especially in the theatre plays that preceded them, it's vital that the audience know what's going on in the minds of the characters. Imagine one of Shakespeare's plays at the Globe Theatre hundreds of years ago. How does an actor communicate subtle hidden feelings to a spectator at the back of the standing section while the audience around them guffaw and shout and tempestuous rain drenches them?
So here's what I didn't understand. Usually I'm with you because we both speak English. I mean, you speak English, but why would you get wet while watching the play?
Yeah, you'd think they'd build a roof, wouldn't they? But it's open air, the Globe.
Okay, I'm like, why would you do that? Especially in England. It's not, hey, we never get rain here.
It's terrible. I mean, the plays go ahead in rain or snow, which is fair play to the actors. They really go for it, or did go for it in Shakespeare's time. The Globe Theatre's not around anymore, but a reconstruction of it on its old site called the Globe Theatre is there, and they still put on plays. And I got absolutely soaked when I went, and ironically, we were watching The Tempest, so we all had a good laugh about that.
That's like those IMAX movies where they spray you with water and they're like, oh, it's so realistic. And you're like, actually, I could use less realism right now. Also, imagine you're getting casted for that. They're like, there's nudity. Are you okay with that? And you're like, it's not the nudity. It's the fact that it's going to be 30 degrees Fahrenheit or 0 degrees Celsius or thereabouts. That's the part that bothers me. That's why I don't want to be naked in this play.
I had an issue like that playing soccer the other day because we didn't have different coloured shirts, so I said, let's take our tops off, and it was raining and no one wanted to do it. And then I insisted, and I looked a bit strange because I was insisting so much that everybody take their tops off. So
Like, what is that dude doing over there?
Andrew's really into the skins thing. Is he married?
Yeah.
He's engaged. What, to a woman, though? Because he's a little pushing the skins thing here.
Yeah, I know. The worst part was I was finally convincing everyone to come around to my idea, because like, you don't want to play when you can't see who's on your team. So I took my t-shirt off and I was like, come on, guys, let's do it. As I did that, the guy who had the bibs that you wear arrived in that moment. So I was the only one with my top off. And I was like, oh, the bibs are here. And I looked like a complete plonker.
The plonker is a word I'm definitely going to use. All right. You're getting soaked. It's very apropos because Tempest is a storm. I get it. It's very clever.
Yeah, big storm. Anyway, it was important in those days, the Shakespeare days, to make characters' feelings known to the spectators. Shakespeare's plays were all about the audience knowing more than the other characters, because that confusion created humour and tension on stage, the fact that the characters are confused about each other, but we know what's going on. It's something we call dramatic irony, and it's where much of the humour in TV and stage comes from today. So to do this, Shakespeare often resorted to soliloquies, which are these weird monologues where suddenly the rest of the cast can't seem to hear them, but the audience, us, we can hear what they're saying, so we get their inner thoughts. But soliloquies are a bit old hat and seen as a bit of a cheat by modern standards. So instead, we expect characters on TV today to portray emotions, such as guilt or jealousy, through subtle but visible downtrodden looks, sunken eyes, what we call facial dialogue. As well as body language, a character that we're supposed to see as defensive might cross their arms. A nervous character might keep their hands in their pockets and shuffle their feet as they walk.
Okay, so I remember learning about soliloquies, I think, in middle school, and we had to write one, and then we went to see a play, and it's like the lights go down, and there's a spotlight on the character, and he turns to the audience, and he goes, but do I really want to do this? If I do this, then that will happen, but if I do this other thing, then this other thing will happen, and it's really obvious, and you don't do that now. Now, poorly written movies have, what they call it, exposition, where the character walks in and goes,
Tom, why are you here? I thought your brother was in the hospital from nearly dying in an accident the other day, and you were supposed to be gone, and no one would be in the office. Why are you here all alone? And you're like, okay, whoever wrote this is not a good screenwriter, and they deserve to be fired. And if the real world looked anything like this, it would be really easy to catch somebody in a lie because of the body language stuff, right? The overacting. It would be like, where were you? Looks down, starts biting nails, and says, nowhere, boss. Why are you asking me these questions? And you'd be like, okay, this person is up to something.
Did you ever see that film, The Room?
The worst movie ever, I think it's known as.
Yeah, what you were just explaining,
Yeah,
it
Karen.
reminded me of it. The exposition. Hi, Mark. What are you doing? And they had the whole exposition stuff because exactly they didn't use body signals and stuff. Also, Jordan, we've got to get hold of this soliloquy that you wrote. Was it like a teenage angst thing filled with emotion and stuff?
Oh, I don't even think it was that good. I wish I could remember it, but I'm sure it was based on characters that we had to create. It was probably mostly what I just gave as the example. Really crappy dialogue, something that makes absolutely no sense. Jordan, where's your dog? I don't know. I was walking in the other day. Oh my gosh, my dog could have run away. The other day, all these things happened that we don't have time to do in the play, but I need to tell the audience. Nothing is lost due to that soliloquy ending up in what is now the recycle bin.
I think a lot is lost. A lot is lost. Obviously, the most famous soliloquy would be To Be or Not to Be, of course, where Hamlet is weighing up whether to act on the death of his father or the murder of his father. But the fact that we are smart enough to notice and understand the facial dialogue and body language in TV scenes means that, as you point out, we are also smart enough to hide those signs in our own behavior from other people.
Or at least try to, right? Because guilty people on TV, they look shifty, they don't hold eye contact, they look away, they hop from one leg
That
to another,
sucked.
sometimes they tremble or they stutter, and I noticed that. So if I'm trying to hide my guilt, I'm like, all right, eye contact, firm handshake, look him straight in the eye, shoulders back, look confident. I didn't do that, obviously, criminal thing. And I remember lying to my principal in middle school about something, and she actually told another kid that she didn't think it was me because I looked her in the eye and I looked confident when I was talking. I was like, I'm so good at lying, but she was just terrible.
That's amazing, because I've heard you say as well, and I really relate to you when you say this, that it's very difficult for you to lie because you do get a bit flustered now as an adult and flushed and red-faced, which even when I'm telling the truth, I'll go really red and sweaty and think, God, they must think I'm lying.
Yeah, I'm a terrible liar now. But when I was a kid, I don't know if I was a good liar. I think I just practiced more. Whereas an adult, I'm like, I'm eventually going to get caught. I should probably just be like, you know what? I did that. I should have done that. I'm also not committing crimes now. Back then, I was. No way to sugarcoat that.
I know about you, Jordan. I know what you've been getting up to. But you're right, yeah, as an adult, probably best just not to commit crimes. But when we do, humans are pretty skilled at using the basics, as you say, look someone in the eye and that kind of thing, to cover it. So those TV shows pretty much give us instructions on exactly what not to do, how not to look if you want to get away with something. So we mustn't rely on body language to tell us who is guilty or innocent. Some people cross their arms because they find that comfortable, not because they're being defensive. As it happens, the victim of one of the worst cases of over-reliance on body language has been on both of our podcasts.
Ah, okay. Amanda Knox, right? She comes home to find her roommate has been murdered in Italy. Police find evidence of DNA matching a known burglar in the area all over the victim's room. But then they decide that Amanda is the culprit, this random 20-year-old girl who's never done anything in her life. And that's episode 386, by the way. Tell us what you think, because it's obviously insane, in my opinion.
Yeah, it seems mad looking back, although still, whenever I speak about the case, I get a lot of hate mail from people assuming that suggesting it wasn't Amanda means that I don't care about the victim, which couldn't be further from the truth. It's just that we just want to make sure that the right person gets put in prison.
I actually get a lot of that as well. I get a lot of kooks in the inbox, still on the comments on the YouTube video. Don't even get me started, but they say things like, you've been hoodwinked by the mainstream media. She's a persuasive faker of all things nonverbal. And they cite some strange evidence, usually that they've made up or that they found on an internet forum, implying Amanda was let off on some technicality of high court Italian law and is actually guilty, but simply has everybody fooled. I would suppose that finding a culprit and putting someone in prison probably makes us all feel better about the murder. Like, we cracked the case. But an innocent person in prison is actually just another tragedy that you can add to the first one, especially she was 20 and she was in Italian prison for a long time, if memory serves.
4 years in an Italian prison. That may not be as bad as losing a life and being brutally murdered, but it's far worse than anything that most of us would ever have to endure. To give a bit of context, Amanda Knox was a 20-year-old American exchange student in Perugia, Italy. Her Italian boyfriend, Raffaele Solicito, and her came home one day to find her housemate, Meredith Kircher's door locked, and it emerged that she had been brutally murdered. I took a keen interest in the case at the time because Meredith was about my age and was studying
I
at the same
can't win them all.
college university as me, Leeds University. And we both took years abroad. I went to France and she went to Italy. And she never came back. And it was tragic for her family and everyone in her orbit. But of course, that doesn't mean that locking Amanda and her boyfriend up for 4 years in an Italian prison was anything but an atrocious miscarriage of justice.
So remind me, what was it initially about her that made police decide she was the culprit? Because there's circumstantial evidence, but I remember there was a lot of, ooh, normally at a murder, you'd never reacted this way. And she was canoodling with her boyfriend at the murder scene, which is a little bit like, why would you do that? But it's also not like you definitely murdered this person.
Yeah, a lot of it came from the press as well as an Italian detective desperate to find the murderer. And the story of Amanda made headlines around the world because she was a young, attractive, intelligent, and ambitious woman. And there were suggestions Meredith might have been murdered in a sex game. In a sense, the story got so big because she was so atypical as a murder suspect and because of misogyny in the media. It looks like the case's prosecutors got a little too mixed up in the sensationalism of the whole thing. So while the tabloids printed stories that painted Amanda as a sex-obsessed lunatic, prosecutors did all they could to make every move she made fit that narrative. Confirmation bias. So she's caught buying red lingerie the day after the murder. It looks suspicious, like she really is this sex-crazed devil. But she just needed new underwear because she wasn't able to access her clothes at the crime scene. It had all been cordoned off.
Sure, that makes sense, yeah.
Yeah, she's seen, as you say, kissing her boyfriend outside the house the morning after the murder. And again, this is seen as a sign she's like a randy psychopath. And I remember at the time feeling sad about Meredith's murder and seeing that kiss through the prism of the newspaper stories. And I thought it was really odd behaviour from Amanda. But now I'm a lot older, and I just see a scared young woman, as you say, 20 years old, and a scared young man comforting one another, totally unprepared for how their lives were about to change forever.
Yeah, I remember thinking it's weird, and I remember the headlines Foxy Noxy, which I talked to her about on the podcast, and I guess Foxy in English is more like wily. She's a little bit, we would say squirrely maybe, whereas in American English it means sexy, so I guess it works both ways. But I would imagine if you are in another country, if somebody around you gets murdered, you're going to gravitate towards the person who speaks the language of the country that you're in, and that was this boyfriend. And so it's, yeah, I'm going to cling to anybody who's going to give me a little bit of comfort at that time, especially because that could have been me if I hadn't been over at that person's house to get my shag on or whatever they were doing. So it seems as though she was shell-shocked, like she was walking in a bit of a daze. But for the TV shows, we really do expect a different reaction. We want her to be down on her knees, screaming at the sky, visibly distraught in a very visceral way that's obvious. And it's, okay, we're just not satisfied by her looking really tired and gazing off into the distance, totally zoned out. So we want to punish her for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who wrote about this. That Foxy Noxy developed as her soccer nickname because she was wily, like she was really fast when she played soccer and she was like quick on it, so they called her Foxy Noxy for that reason. And then it was taken by the press to mean this sort of sexy kind of thing. But we are, in this case, the Shakespearean audience, and the character isn't acting how we expect. And that makes us mad. And I think she was in a daze. She even told me on my podcast that she has a tendency to get very deer in the headlights. There's so much that went wrong in that case. The Italian authorities put her in a cell for hours and hours with nothing to do. Now, they've done experiments where people try to sit alone in a room for a prolonged amount of time, and people give up. They can't do it. Even if there's a lot of money they can win by staying in a room for quite a few days on their own, people find that really hard. She's doing yoga to pass the time. She's stretching. She didn't do the murder. Why shouldn't she stretch and keep active? A guard walks in and decides that she's doing cartwheels, and then this goes down as further evidence of her bizarre body behavior. She's now celebrating the murder in her cell.
All of these things, the lingerie, the kissing, the supposed cartwheels, they all really had good explanations. But what if there weren't any? What if she was a sex-crazed Foxy Noxy, if she just doesn't care about the murder, she wanted to do lingerie, screw it, and she was cartwheeling because she didn't give a crap? That's not great, but it's also not evidence that she actually murdered somebody. Not really.
No, and that's the crux of it. We're so influenced by what we see on TV that we sometimes find it hard to accept that people just act differently and weirdly and not how you expect them to. You have a right to not care about the murder of a person you didn't know very well. Sure, the people in your vicinity might judge you for that and might be a bit wary of you. But we don't put people in prison for not having the right levels of empathy or the right reactions. We put them in prison because we have substantial evidence that they committed a serious crime. If I may paraphrase a line from George Orwell's 1984, to wear an improper expression on your face was itself a punishable offence. There was even a word for it, face crime.
Face crime.
Well, what I think about that is I think people are overwhelmed when they're being asked to solve these sorts of crimes. When I remember seeing one of the documentaries of her case, it seemed like the law enforcement in that area was not prepared to try or investigate a case like that. So, yeah, they were just using a lot of bad science, bad psychology, bad rules of thumb. Yeah. I hope that it may educate some people down the line, but I don't know. I just say, like, people are hard of learning. Anyway, on that note, I'm going to go to bed. I really enjoyed trying out the stream, and I hope that the TikTok feed has some audio from the game. I don't know. I just figured out how to get audio into my headphones this morning. So this is still new to me, and I have several other solutions that I might try if it's not working. So that will be another day, though. For now, I bid you adieu. Bye-bye.